What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome into this edition of the QnA Rundown. My name is Alex Strouf.
My name is Quinn McGuire, and we're going to talk to you guys today about what you need to know in your upcoming fantasy football draft. Later on, we're going to discuss more about the NBA and what's going on the East Coast. Alex?
Absolutely. Let's dive into fantasy football first off. Who's your top guy this year? I think there's only two or three obvious answers, and I'm imagining you'll go one of those directions, right?
Right now, I'm going with Le'Veon Bell. It's an easy choice for me. I had him last year in last year's NFL football season, and he is just an absolute beast, not just on the running side, but on the receiving side. He said in his tweet this year that this year was going to be his best upcoming football season statistic-wise. He wants that big contract. He knows he's going to get it if he can put up big numbers. I got to go with Le'Veon Bell. There's some other choices out there that are close to him, but Le'Veon's been consistent for me. He's been doing it well for the past few years. I like it.
Yeah, in a PPR league, I think he's your best option, right? But I look at two teams in the NFL this year that could possibly put up 13, 14 wins. One of them is Pittsburgh, who I think is winning the Super Bowl this year. And the other one is Los Angeles being the Rams. So Todd Gurley is my top guy. I think after the production year he had, he was absolutely unstoppable essentially for more than half of the year. I think he's going to do that yet again, and that team is going to win 13 or 14 games. So my top guy is Todd Gurley. If I had the number one pick, I'd go Gurley's direction probably 90% of the time, just because I've got a hunch, a hot top hunch for him.
Yeah, I like Todd Gurley, and Todd Gurley is the exact reason why I came in second place last year and not first place. I mean, he is just a beast. He went off last year. The little concerns I have about him is that this was a bounce back. Last year was a bounce back year for him. His second year in the league, he did not put up the great numbers that we usually see him put up. I mean, I think he averaged like 3.1 yards per carry. That doesn't cut it when you're a running back, an RB1 in fantasy football. He had a great year last year. He is having a great offseason, and he's now under Sean McVay's system for the second year. I'm a big fan of Sean McVay, being a Redskins fan. It was hard to see him leave, but if I had the second pick, I would go Todd Gurley. Le'Veon Bell just has that much consistency with him. I see him do it year after year after year. And I think everyone last year made a big mistake picking David Johnson, and we all saw what happened with him last year. So when you pick the hot guys, there's always that risk reward. When you pick the consistently hot guys, it's a safer bet. So I'm landing on the safer side, but Todd Gurley could easily have better stats than Le'Veon Bell. I don't deny that.
Yeah, I guess I can't really argue either way. I just think Todd Gurley will have the better year. I think he's going to go for another MVP caliber season. But again, it's consistency versus consistency. There's not much of an argument. Let's dive into our next topic, and that would be the sleepers this year in the fantasy football world. I'll let you lead off.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with the running backs right now. And I look at guys like Derrick Henry. When you see that, you look at DeMarco Murray being gone, he's going to get all the touches. I like Derrick Henry a lot. He was a beast in college, and he was a beast in the NFL when he got his touches. I like him a lot. I also like Darius Geis. Obviously, I have a bias being a Redskins fan, but I see what he's done in college. He runs angry. He's easily going to be the number one running back, at least for the first two downs for that team. I like Darius Geis a lot. I think you'll be able to pick him up in later rounds, 3 or 4 round, depending on if it's an 8-man league or 12-man league. But I like Darius Geis. I'm not really sure who else I could say are the sleepers for the running backs. What about you? Do you have any?
Yeah, so my number one guy was Derrick Henry. You mentioned him. I saw him. I did a mock draft. I was telling you a little bit before we started recording that I was doing a mock draft just before this 10-team league. Derrick Henry was I believe, a beginning of the 6th round pick, which is just blows my mind. Deion Lewis wasn't far behind him, but I think Deion Lewis will just be taking those, sometimes third down touches, and Derrick Henry will carry the rest of the load. So I don't understand why this guy's falling so far, because he's on a reigning playoff team in Tennessee, a team I think will win that division this year. It just blows my mind he's falling that low. But moving to wide receivers, I've got 2 names, and they're both from the Dolphins last year. One of them no longer on the Dolphins. I'll start with Jarvis Landry. Jarvis Landry is falling to, again, 6th, 7th, 8th round range, which is just amazing to me because, the quarterback situation in Cleveland still has a couple of question marks. Can Tyrod Taylor have another solid year at quarterback? But when you have two competent targets in Jarvis Landry and Josh Gordon, you'll probably produce. But moving to Miami now with a healthy Ryan Tannehill and Jarvis Landry out of the South Beach, you got to look at Devontae Parker. Devontae Parker, he inhibits some crazy speed, good route running ability. I think Devontae Parker set for a breakout year.
I completely agree. You know, I had Jarvis Landry as my number one sleeper as well when it came to the wide receivers. But I'm going with another Browns receiver, Josh Gordon. I mean, he's falling because he was honest to the media and he was honest about how he was dealing with his addiction problems. But he was trying to be proactive about it. He was saying, look, I'm still not 100% past the craving aspect of the drugs and, you know, what he's been a part of. But I think that him being proactive about it is a good sign, not a bad sign. A lot of people are interpreting that as like, oh, wow, now he's going to fall. And I think, wow, this guy has his head screwed on right now. He's realizing what his body is doing, what his mind is doing when it comes to these cravings, and he's being proactive about it. So I like Josh Gordon. I think he's going to put up big numbers. I think him and Jarvis Landry will both have 1,000-yard seasons.
I'm with you. I think as long as Tyrod, like you said, can produce, they are set for big years. Let's move on to the next one. You talked about cravings. These cravings for these guys that we're going to talk about next are always high, and sometimes they don't come through like expected. This is the fool's gold category. I'll let you lead off with your running back.
Yeah, so I got to go with Saquon Barkley.
We're in agreement again.
You know, Saquon Barkley, I've been doing a few mock drafts as well, and he has been going up as high as 5 in some of these in these drafts. 5, 6, 7. That's the range that I've been seeing him fall in. I wouldn't touch this guy until the second round. I have not seen enough from him. When you look at his college production, he produces the most against horrible teams. He has not impressed me on the field against tough competition. I don't trust that New York Giants offensive line. I don't know how competent Eli Manning will be during the regular season. We all know how great he is during the postseason. I don't know if he will put Saquon Barkley in the right position. I mean, the Giants have all the talent in the world. Whether or not they can put it together is a big question. I like Saquon Barkley a lot because he's going to get touches, so I would grab him in the second round. But I'm not grabbing him in the 5 through 7 range.
Right, no Quinn. We're officially in the era where rookie running backs are becoming, you know, the stars. Last year we had Kareem Hunt, Alvin Kamara, Leonard Fournette. Right. You had names and names and names where these guys are producing just as well as the 10-year pros or the 8-year pros who we're seeing every year produce. But then you're seeing these rookies skyrocket to the top running backs of the league. I think Kareem Hunt led the league in rushing last year. So, I mean, there's no doubt that rookie running backs can sometimes provide even a bigger punch than some veterans. But Saquon Barkley at, you know, pick 5, pick 6, pick 7, as you mentioned, is too high. So, again, we're in agreement with the sleepers. We're in agreement with the fool's gold running back because Saquon Barkley, I'm not saying he won't produce. I'm just saying he won't produce to the level of a 6th or 5th overall pick.
Yeah, I completely agree. And another fool's gold, and this happened in one of my fantasy drafts. I saw Alshon Jeffrey being picked in the second round. Wow. I do not like that at all. I've been seeing him being picked in the second and third round. I think he's somebody you need to pick up in like the 9th round, possibly. He is a wide receiver 3 at best. He had an awful injury. He's having this surgery that is not an easy fix. I mean, and when you look at how dynamic the Eagles' offense is, he's not going to be getting all the touches. This is an offense that has lots of running backs who can catch the ball, and then lots of wide receivers who are able to do just enough to get the first downs. I mean, this is a grinding team. I don't see Alshon Jeffrey putting up the numbers that he put up in Chicago. So I would say he's fool's gold for the people who are thinking that he's a 3rd, 4th round pick. He is not. He is a 9th, 10th, 11th round pick at best.
Wow. So you have him way down, which I can't really argue with, but you know, if Carson Wentz or Nick Foles, I mean, both of them obviously stud quarterbacks, they're looking for a top target. He could always step up and be that guy. So I don't know if I'd go that low, but I understand where you're coming from. I don't think he's a 3rd round pick either. But in the wide receiver category, a guy that has been going 3rd, 4th round, and I don't even know who's going to be throwing him the ball. That's Larry Fitzgerald, possibly in his final season. Sam Bradford can't stay healthy. Josh Rosen, just a rookie. They're going to win like 4 games this year, and I don't know how much production Larry Fitzgerald can provide, especially even if he fits into your flex category or a wide receiver 2 category. I just don't see him being the old Larry Fitz we're used to, especially when you don't even know who's going to be throwing him the ball the majority of the year.
And this is tough for me because I picked him up last year in the 4th round, in the 4th or 5th round, I believe, and he produced. And I was always hesitant. He had a good year. It's always a big question with Larry Fitzgerald. When is the production going to fall off? It seems like he just keeps doing it and doing it and doing it. It's almost in a way like Tom Brady. It's like, God, how old are you going to get until it stops? And I think this is a good segue into some of the running backs at Fool's Gold, because I think David Johnson is definitely one of them. He was the consensus number 1 pick last year in almost every NFL football, fantasy football draft. And I don't see him being a top 5 pick. And that's where I see him falling in all of my mock drafts. He's top 5. He's slipped as low as 6. I wouldn't pick him up until 11. I think he's still a 1st-round pick, but I don't know if I think Todd Gurley and Le'Veon Bell are just I would pick Antonio Brown over David Johnson. And that's just, that's my –
Yeah, but David Johnson's still seeing that 4th overall pick, even 3rd overall pick if somebody wants a running back that high. It makes sense because he produced so well 2 years ago. He was the top guy in fantasy, if I'm not mistaken. He was like a number 2 overall pick last year. But coming off of an ACL tear, it's never an easy task. It's nowhere near unless he comes out and does what Adrian Peterson did, the absolute impossible, come back, lead the league in rushing.
Was he ACL tear?
I think so. I could be mistaken.
I thought he also I'm sure he had a wrist injury as well, something with his arm had to do with carrying the football as well. I'm not sure if he had ACL. I might have to double check that. But either way, he's coming into an offense with a new quarterback, a new system, an older Larry Fitzgerald. We don't know who's even going to be the starter, if Josh Rosen will rise up and be the starting quarterback. So that all plays a huge effect in how well I wouldn't touch him top 5. I would definitely take him top 10. I wouldn't touch him top 5.
Right.
And I'm leaning on the safe side because, my fantasy football leagues have money on the line.
Right. I don't think he'd ever fall that deep, though. So maybe he won't be your issue that late.
Yeah.
Exactly. So let's move on. Final fantasy football category for today: quarterbacks. You have a hot take on this, so let me hear it.
Look, this is my philosophy when it comes to drafting quarterbacks. Don't touch any quarterback until you're in the 10th or 11th round. If you're in this, I have one exception to this. If you're in the 7th round, end of the 6th round, and you see Aaron Rodgers on the board, I wouldn't mind grabbing him. If you already feel solid about your receiving core, your running back core, and you want to grab him in the 6th or 7th round, totally understand that. That's fair. But you can grab guys like Kirk Cousins, like Alex Smith, guys that are solid. Even Cam Newton. You can get them. You can get Cam Newton in the 9th round. So I see get your guys that produce that produce a lot but are rare. The running backs, the wide receivers, get them, get your backups to them, make sure that the bye weeks are not overlapping and that you have a good starting core. The quarterbacks, they're everywhere. You'll find a quarterback. You can get Ben Roethlisberger in the 13th round. You can get Sam Bradford all the way down at the very end. Guys that can produce big numbers on big days. So I'm not one of those guys who grab Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers in the first 3 or 4 rounds. I think that's a bad philosophy. I see lots of people who do that, not winning their leagues and not being successful in fantasy football.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. I think I saw a statistic last week. It was like 82% of league-winning quarterbacks in ESPN leagues last year were either drafted after the 10th round or undrafted.
Yeah,
and the winning quarterbacks.
Exactly
And obviously that comes into play because you have Carson Wentz that was injured, Aaron Rodgers that was injured, and the list goes on. But regardless, you look at guys like you mentioned, Kirk Cousins, Alex Smith. You can even look elsewhere like Ben Roethlisberger, like you said. Jimmy Garoppolo might be around round 10 or round 11.
Manning.
Eli, exactly. Guys that can still produce. That Phillip Rivers, who might still be leading a playoff team,
sure.
that will still be on the board.
Case Keenum, maybe. I mean,
competent quarterbacks that might be leading teams to 8-9 wins or even a playoff spot. So if you're winning, obviously your offense is producing enough points to win a football game, and that comes because of your quarterback most of the time. So I think waiting is the way to go. At least round, and like you said, if there's always exceptions. If Rodgers is still at round 7 and the 0.001% of leagues that will happen, go for it. But otherwise, you got to wait. Yeah,
for sure. And this actually brings me up to one of the most interesting guys in fantasy football, at least for me, is Russell Wilson.
Yep.
I've seen him being picked right after Rodgers and right after Brady. But when you look at the options that he have, I mean, they just lost Paul Richardson. They just lost their star tight end. I don't see – and they don't have their star center that they traded a long time ago for Jimmy. So I don't see Russell Wilson producing the same kind of numbers. So if we go back into a previous segment, we go back into Fool's Gold, I think that Russell Wilson could definitely be one of those Fool's Gold quarterbacks that you could see some people grabbing in the 6th and 7th round. I highly recommend against that.
He produces points, though. I think he was the top quarterback last year, if I'm not mistaken, points-wise.
No, you're right. But he had targets. I don't know if those targets
were there. That's fair. But what he can do with his legs is definitely something that's appealing in fantasy football. So,
which makes him such a conundrum, and you're absolutely right about that.
Exactly. But I'm with you. I don't think I'd take a 7th-round pick on him. If he's there around 10, then, oh, crap, yeah, let me have him. But otherwise, no, I'm 100% with you. So let's do a sports change. Let's throw away the shoulder pads and grab the headband. We're talking your guy John Wall made a comment last week saying the East is completely open, not quote unquote, but something along the lines of that.
Paraphrasing, it's wide open. And look, I don't think he in that statement he's trying to disrespect any of the great teams that are in the East. I don't think this is a shot at Boston, a shot at Philly, a shot at Toronto. And look, the East is not wide open, as a matter of fact. The Boston Celtics are amazing. What they were able to do without their top 2 best players is just phenomenal in the playoff season. When you look at the Sixers, I mean, they have 2 top 20 players in the league. They are on the rise. I think that Ben Simmons is only going to get better. And Embiid, if he can stay healthy, is the best center in the league, in my opinion. And then Toronto is a big question mark. They have a great bench. And then Kawhi Leonard is, in my opinion, the best two-way player in the game when healthy. I mean, he is just a phenomenal defender. He can average 25 a game. He can shoot the three over 40%. I like Kawhi Leonard a lot when it comes to basketball strictly. And the East is not wide open, but we all know what he meant. LeBron is not there. I mean, you can have the best season in the East like Boston did 2 years ago and like Toronto did last year, but LeBron James will find a way to get past you in the playoffs. He's proven that. And now that he's gone, I think that what John Wall was more alluding to is that during the playoff season, anything can happen. We all knew that LeBron was going to the finals. It's happened 8 years in a row in the East. When it comes to the playoffs, anything can happen. The Wizards are a sleeping team. I mean, people are sleeping on them a lot. They have a great starting five. I think that they have a chance to make some noise. 4 through 6 is my prediction. I'm hoping at 4. More realistically, they'll probably be 5 or 6.
Look, this conversation is exhausted, so I'm just going to break the Eastern Conference into 3 groups. There's 3 teams at the top. You mentioned them: Toronto, Boston, Philadelphia. There's 3 teams in the middle. That's Milwaukee, Indiana, and the aforementioned Wizards. And then you have the other 9. Those first 3 and 3, those first 6 I mentioned, are the only teams that are going to make any noise in the playoffs, but only 4 of them can advance past the first round. So you look at Washington, Milwaukee, Indiana, who is the best team of those 3? That's the most interesting storyline other than, how's Kawhi going to fit into Toronto? How are Kyrie and Gordon Hayward going to mesh with the group that went so deep last year? Other than that, of those 3 teams, that is the most interesting headline. I mean, who is going to be the best? Who's going to get that 4 seed? That 4-5 matchup is no doubt going to be so fun to watch, and as is the 3-6. Right.
Yeah, 100%.
But, I mean, you look at teams 7 and 8 in the Eastern Conference, and whoever that ends up being, maybe
Miami, Detroit,
Cleveland,
exactly.
You can make a case for. other than that, I mean, those two teams aren't even interesting because you know they're going to get swept or win one game against either Philadelphia, Toronto, or Boston. So It's that middle of the road team where who's that fourth team that's going to squeeze in there? Are they going to be able to knock off a couple of solid teams and make it to the finals? But that's the only storyline coming out of the Eastern Conference right now, as is open. So, my opinion, I don't think it's open. You're with me. Those top three teams are going to be really, really hard to beat. But the Wizards present a really, really solid starting lineup, as you mentioned. The Bucks have Giannis Antetokounmpo, who is probably the most freakishly scary player in the NBA right now.
I'd say he's the best player in the East right now.
No, I'm with you. With
Kawhi Leonard, maybe Kawhi, depending on how healthy he is. If Kawhi's healthy, he's the best in the East. But if not, I mean, Giannis is unbelievable. I mean, and he's only getting better every year.
And then you have that duo of Victor Oladipo and Miles Turner. If they can produce like they did last year, they can definitely make some noise as well. So, I mean, other than that, that's the East being open for you. You have three teams that, they're good. Three teams that, okay, maybe. And then you have the other nine.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm with you. Let's move on to a fun segment. We call this extended supervision. We take off the time limit. We take off we don't take off the suit coats because we look handsome. But we will take off any rules, and we will go into a topic a little bit deeper than we have the rest of the other ones. So let's dive into a recent signing, a recent trade, and everything else that's surrounding this former superstar named Carmelo Anthony in the NBA. He's officially a Houston Rocket. Now, I've always been pretty outspoken about the fact he can no longer provide like he once could. I don't think he's going to fit into Houston very well at all. I think you're on the other side of the canvas, if you will. Please tell me your opinion on the signing.
I've always been a Carmelo Anthony fan, so I like the signing a lot. When I see Carmelo Anthony and I see all the criticisms that he gets, well, it's hard to disagree with him. I understand where they're coming from. He is overpaid. He doesn't play enough defense. But this guy can flat out ball, and he wasn't able to do that last year, not because he's getting worse, but because of the situation that he was put in. When you play with a guy like James Harden as your focal point, it's so much easier to get open shots because when you're guarding James Harden and let's say a screen's running after you, you can't go underneath the screen. You have to go through the screen. Because if you go underneath, he's going to shoot the three. If you go through it, he's going to go in front of you and do a zero step. So it makes him so hard to guard. Carmelo Anthony can just post up. He can just be in the corner and take corner threes and wait for that pass to come to him because James Harden and Chris Paul are both elite passers. So I see – when you look at Russell Westbrook, I love Russell Westbrook. He is amazing. He puts up amazing stats, great athlete. But he is not a guy – you can go underneath the screen when you're guarding him because worrying about his three-point shot would be silly because his percentage is not up there. So it allows, when you're able to go under the screen, it allows help defense to go a lot easier. So if Russell Westbrook makes that pass to Carmelo Anthony, the defender that was helping, that went under the screen can also close him out and make it a harder shot for Melo. So I think when you have guys like James Harden and Chris Paul and Quinn Capella who are better options right now, they're more athletic, they can put up better numbers. It allows Carmelo Anthony to get open shots. We know he can hit open shots. He had a bad year last year. I don't think that we should characterize his entire career based off of the past few seasons. I mean, this guy averaged 20 points a game his entire career until last year, at the very least. So I like Carmelo Anthony. I think that if you, and this is just any hypothetical, let's say you want to be the best that you can be. You want to have the best efficiencies that you want to have. Would you rather play with Paul George and Russell Westbrook, or would you rather play with Chris Paul and James Harden? I pick the latter every single time because I know the passes are coming to me and I'm going to be a more efficient shooter. I don't see him averaging more than 20 points a game. I see him in that 14 to 18 range. But I do see his percentages going up to around 45% from the field and around 37% from deep. So I like Carmelo Anthony. I think it's a great pickup. I think losing Trevor Ariza was awful. I don't know why they didn't just shell out more money for him and go over the cap line. But that's here nor there. He's gone. He's in Phoenix, I think, which I don't know why he would go to Phoenix. I guess he already has his championship from LA, but I like Melo. I like the Melo signing. It's easy to hate on him. It's very easy to hate on him. But I think he's a baller, and if he is put in the right position to play, he can play well.
So you mentioned the duos, Chris Paul and James Harden, one of the best backcourts in the entire NBA. I always give credit to Damian Lillard, C.J. McCollum, Bradley Beal, John Wall. But, I mean, there's no better duo. There can't be a better duo.
And then the Splash Bros, you can't forget about
right,
them.
exactly. But you cannot top, I don't think, in my opinion, Chris Paul and James Harden. That said, I mean, obviously he falls into a nice system, but Carmelo Anthony has always been the guy, right? This was the first year and he wasn't the guy, and he suffered from it, right? His shot percentage went down. His plus minus was 72nd of 82 eligible forwards. His every points per game. Obviously, the first time he was under 20 points per game in his career, you said. So there's no doubt he suffered from not being the guy, and he couldn't find a particular niche with the Oklahoma City Thunder last year. So then, obviously, they get rid of him because it was only hurting their chemistry on the floor, if you will.
But, and their cap. I mean, their cap space, too.
He's worth so much because of what he's done. But he goes to Houston now. He becomes, and I've said this many times, he's now the fourth option, and he needs to find a way to accept that. I want Clint Capella doing more than Carmelo Anthony. I obviously want the aforementioned Paul and James Harden doing more offensively. Carmelo needs to come in and find a niche where he's a 13-point-per-game scorer. He's hitting those corner threes, as you mentioned, finding certain roles both offensively, defensively, that can make them succeed higher than they did last year. Because there's only one way to go, and that's to the finals. That's the only way they can succeed higher because they got to Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals. Trevor Ariza's departure, I don't think bringing in Carmelo is a better option than keeping Trevor Ariza. I really, really do not think that. I think Ariza's been playing in that system for quite a few years. He found his role. He knew his role. He did really, really well in his role. And
as a defender, too. I mean,
right. I mean, he was the best defender on that team, debatably. So it's really, really hard to look at losing a guy like Ariza, bringing in an older guy who obviously in his career has accomplished more than Ariza, but right now isn't playing as well as Ariza, in my humble opinion.
He hasn't won a championship, but Ariza has. So
exactly, that's
Ariza.
That's the one he has, I guess, right? We could make the argument, but I can't get behind Melo being that next big part of a big three, if you will. You know, they tried to make that hype train around PG-13 Russ and Melo last year in Oklahoma City, that they were the next big three. But I can't get behind this right now because there is no way that Carmelo brings I wouldn't want to say any more, but way more to the table than Trevor Ariza did. He brings maybe a little bit more on the leadership aspect. Maybe he's a little bit better of a shooter, but that's really all I can get behind that he brings more than Ariza did, because Ariza, like you mentioned, was a better defender. I just don't know how this signing is going to work out. I'm not a huge fan of it. I think retaining Ariza would have been a much better option.
Look, those are all fair concerns, and I think they're all valid. I think absolutely valid. But the one thing that we're doing right now is we're looking at this signing from the perspective of Houston. When you look at this signing from the perspective of Carmelo Anthony, could Carmelo Anthony have put himself in a better position on a different team? So this is a good signing for him. He put himself in the best place to succeed. And I think fair. Houston realizes that. And if he is able to he's not as valuable as Clint Capella on the market right now. That's obvious. But he's a way more dynamic scorer than Clint Capella is. I mean, Clint Capella is a younger DeAndre Jordan. He is one-dimensional. He is a pick and roll, alley-oop, block, defending the rim type center, which is fine. They're great, but he is by no means a Boogie Cousins, Joel Embiid. He is not the third best player in the sense that he is the best offensive, more dynamic shooter. Carmelo will have him beat any day when it comes to a shooting contest, right? So Carmelo Anthony could still be technically in that big three. Look, Clint Capella knows his role, and he knows his role is worth a lot. So he got his money. I'm happy for him, but he's not a better basketball player than Carmelo Anthony. He does his role right now better than Carmelo Anthony, because Carmelo Anthony, for the past couple of years, doesn't really know what his role is. Is he the guy?
He can't find it. He can't establish it, and that's my issue with Carmelo.
Exactly, and that's all fair. But when you look at where he could have gone and succeeded better than in Houston. There are no teams that top Houston. He has put himself in the hands of two elite playmakers. I mean, 2 years ago, James Harden averaged 11 assists a game. Last year, it was around 9. Chris Paul has been averaging 9, 10 assists for almost a decade now.
Yep.
Carmelo Anthony knows that he is going to get the ball in the position where he'll score at the highest percentage. And I think he knows that, and signing to Houston was a very smart decision on his end. Now, that doesn't negate the fact that letting Ariza go was a bad decision for Houston. I completely agree with that. Trevor Ariza is a better defender. He brings more to their game than Carmelo on both sides of the ball. But seeing that Ariza's gone, I don't think bringing Carmelo Anthony makes them a worse team. Absolutely. Right. I mean, you add him for $2 million a year. Why not? See what he can do. He's going to be a Hall of Fame player. He still looks good in workouts. Let's see if he can mesh with this core.
Yeah, and I think the biggest point I think we keep bringing up is the fact that he's had a hard time establishing a role, establishing a niche. I think the only role he's going to establish himself in is Houston as a washed-up former All-Star. I really am for him on that. But hopefully it proves me wrong, because I'd love to see Houston bring some competition to Golden State. Hopefully obviously from the Eastern Conference, we're going to get a fresh finals, but maybe we could get one of both sides. And maybe Carmelo could be the savior. He could bring a totally fresh finals, but right now I just have no.
He could be the Steve Kerr in the conference finals that gets that shot that wins them the game. I mean, look, when you go, what was that streak? 27 missed threes from the Rockets. I guarantee you, if Carmelo was on that team, that streak wouldn't have happened. He can make a three when it matters. He's done it too many times. So we'll see what happens. He could look. The spread is so big. He could totally fall off, and there could be dysfunction in the locker room, and he could average 8 points a game and have horrible percentage, or he could average 15 points a game, and he could have great percentages, and the Rockets could still be a top 2, top 3 team in the West. It's hard to figure out what will happen, but we'll see. We'll see this upcoming season.
We'll talk about it in our fantasy basketball preview.
Yeah, of course.
Exactly. That's Quinn McGuire. I'm Alex Strouf. Thanks for tuning into the QnA Rundown. We'll see you next week.